Michael Jenkins gazed out the window of his Manhattan high-rise office. The New York skyline was wrapped in twilight, countless lights beginning to twinkle. Through his career as an investment analyst, he had seen this view thousands of times, but today it looked somehow different. His cell phone rang, bringing him back to reality. "Michael Jenkins," he answered in a professional tone. "Michael, it's Dad." The moment he heard Edward's voice, Michael's back straightened. Calls from his father were rare. Usually, contact with his parents was either for business matters or criticism of his life choices. "Dad, what is it?" he asked cautiously. "I want to talk to you. Your mother and I, along with Victor, are planning a family trip, a cruise. We'd like you and Julia to join us." Michael was speechless with surprise. His relationship with his parents had remained tense, even though he was successful as an excellent investment analyst. Charlotte and Edward, who had made their fortune in the oil industry, dismissed his career as merely a hobby and constantly praised his brother Victor for his dedication to the family business. His divorce had made the relationship even worse. 3 years ago, the separation from his ex-wife Brianna had not been amicable. Charlotte and Edward accused him of tarnishing the family name. Brianna also came from an equally wealthy family, and his parents wanted the best matches for their children. Even Michael gaining custody of Julia was criticized by his parents as the result of his selfish decision. "Well," Edward's voice trailed off. "Your mother wants to see you and Julia. She's been talking about you a lot lately." This was a new development. Michael couldn't remember the last time Charlotte had spoken positively about him. "When is the trip?" Michael asked. "Next weekend, 5 days in the Caribbean on our boat." Our boat referred to Charlotte's latest luxury, a 52-foot yacht called Elegant Lady. Michael took a deep breath. "I'll think about it," he replied. After hanging up, he stared out the office window again. Why would his parents suddenly invite him and Julia on a trip? Was it a sign of reconciliation, or was there another reason? When he got home, the babysitter Maria was playing with Legos in the living room with Julia. The moment he saw his daughter, Michael's heart filled with warmth. 5-year-old Julia, with her brown curly hair and intelligent blue eyes, was always curious. "Daddy!" She jumped up. Michael hugged her and kissed the top of her head. "Julia, would you like to see Grandma and Grandpa?" he asked carefully. Julia had only met his parents a few times, and even then they had been cold toward their granddaughter. "Yeah," she answered excitedly. "Can we go on a boat?" "Grandpa's big boat?" Michael smiled. His daughter's pure enthusiasm eased his anxiety a little. Maybe this trip could be a good opportunity. If his parents had changed, he should give Julia a chance to build a relationship with her grandparents. That weekend, Michael and Julia arrived at the port in Miami. The Elegant Lady was docked impressively, with Charlotte and Edward waiting on deck. Victor was visible too. "Michael," Edward opened his arms. "Welcome, and Julia, how you've grown." Charlotte also greeted them with an unusually warm smile. "Son, I'm glad you came." Only Victor stood a bit apart, clearly displeased. "Hey, brother," he said coldly. Michael smiled, hiding his tension. "Thank you. I'm honored to be here." The first 2 days of the journey passed surprisingly peacefully. Charlotte showed unusual interest in Michael's work, asking about his recent investment successes. Edward was kind to Julia, teaching her about the history of ships. However, on the 3rd night, Charlotte called him to the ship's study. "Michael, I want to talk to you." He sat quietly in the chair. Charlotte's expression was serious. "My health isn't good," she said in a low voice. "According to the doctors, I don't have much time left." Michael was shocked. "Mom." "Listen," she raised her hand. "I've been thinking about my inheritance. Victor has secured a sufficient position in the company, but you and Julia need special consideration. I intend to leave most of my estate to the two of you." Michael didn't know what to say. As the morning sun turned the Caribbean waters golden, Michael was drinking coffee on the ship's deck, reflecting on last night's conversation with his mother. Charlotte's sudden confession and talk of inheritance stirred complex emotions in him. For years, he had sought his parents' love and approval, but was always treated as a disappointment. And now, faced with the reality of his mother's impending death and sudden offer of reconciliation, he didn't know what to feel. "Good morning, brother." Turning around, he saw Victor had appeared on deck. Unlike before, he wore a bright smile. Yesterday's sullenness had disappeared, replaced by an unnatural friendliness. "Good morning, Victor," Michael replied cautiously. Victor sat next to Michael, staring at his coffee cup. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" "What were you talking about with Mom yesterday?" Michael hesitated momentarily. "Her health. She seems worried." "I see." Victor's voice was light, but his eyes gleamed sharply. "Is that all?" The conversation was wrapped in subtle tension, but was interrupted by Edward and Julia appearing on deck. Julia was running around energetically, and Edward was unusually smiling kindly at his granddaughter. "Julia, would you like to make cookies with Grandpa today?" Edward suggested. "I'll teach you a special recipe in the kitchen." Julia's eyes lit up. "Really? That sounds great." Michael was a bit surprised. His parents had shown little interest in his daughter before. Was this sudden change related to his mother's confession? Despite a faint doubt, he wanted to welcome the budding relationship between his father and daughter. "Michael," Victor suddenly said, "would you like to sunbathe on the deck this afternoon? Let's talk brother to brother. It's been a while." Michael was surprised. Victor usually avoided spending time with him, but he thought this might be a chance to repair their relationship. "Sure," he replied. "I'll have plenty of time while Julia is with Dad." In the afternoon, Michael lay on a lounge chair on deck, feeling the pleasant Caribbean breeze. Victor, wearing sunglasses, was relaxing in the chair next to him. On the surface, it was a peaceful brother's time, but Michael felt something off about Victor's attitude. "You know, we've been made to compete since we were children," Victor suddenly said. "For our parents' love." Michael answered carefully. "Yes, but I never thought of it as competition." Victor laughed. There was coldness in that laugh. "Really? You always got everything. Top grades in school, college scholarships, and now a brilliant career." "Victor, I just chose my own path. I didn't join the family business because I wanted to succeed on my own." "I see." Victor's voice lowered. "But not this time. This time you won't take everything." Michael sat up. "What are you talking about?" "You always take everything." Victor's voice suddenly turned cold. "Mom's love, the company's attention, and now the inheritance." Michael gasped. "You were listening to our conversation last night." Victor silently stared at the sea. Anger flashed across his face. "We've been planning this for years," he said in a small voice. "Planning? What plan?" Michael began to feel anxious. Victor suddenly stood up, said nothing, and walked away. Feeling confused and frightened, Michael became worried about Julia. He needed to find her immediately. Heading to the kitchen, he saw Edward and Julia together. But something seemed strange. Edward was trying to make Julia drink something, and she appeared to be resisting. "Julia." Michael hurried over. "What are you doing?" Edward turned around, looking surprised. Oh, Michael. We just finished baking cookies. I also made this special hot chocolate. Daddy. Julia ran over to him. Grandpa gave me a weird drink. It's bitter. Michael looked at Edward suspiciously. I'm taking my daughter back to our room. But the cookies aren't done yet. Edward tried to detain them. Please, let me spend just a little more time with Julia. No, we're going now, Michael said firmly, taking Julia's hand. Back in the room, Michael closed the door and took a deep breath. Something was wrong. Victor's word, plan, his father's strange behavior, and his mother's sudden talk of inheritance. Everything was starting to connect. Michael hugged Julia. Are you okay? Don't you feel sick? Julia shook her head. I'm fine, Daddy. I didn't drink Grandpa's drink. Michael sighed with relief. Smart girl? That night, Michael locked the door to their room and made plans to disembark at the next port. He took out his smartphone, checking the Coast Guard contact and emergency location sharing app. He remembered his training as a swimming instructor and prepared for any contingency. Morning light filtered through the curtains as Michael woke up. He had barely slept all night. Julia was sleeping peacefully in his bed. Looking at the clock, it was 6 in the morning. In 2 hours, the ship would arrive at the next port. There, they planned to disembark and head to safety. Michael quietly got up and started packing. He stuffed only essential items into a small backpack, checked his passport and cash and his smartphone in a special waterproof case. He activated the location sharing app, setting it to notify the Coast Guard in an emergency. There was a knock at the door. Michael froze. Michael? Are you awake? Charlotte's voice was heard. He took a deep breath and answered in a calm voice. Yes, Mom. Is something wrong? I want us all to have breakfast on deck one last time. There's a magnificent view. Michael hesitated. Refusing might arouse suspicion. All right, I'll come when I'm ready. He gently woke Julia. Good morning. Please listen carefully to Daddy. Today is a special day. Julia nodded sleepily, rubbing her eyes. Michael dressed her in a waterproof jacket and hid a small life jacket in the backpack. Why do I have to wear a jacket? It's hot, Julia asked curiously. It's still cool in the morning, Michael answered, kissing her head. He took out his smartphone and pressed the record button. He needed to leave evidence of whatever happened. When they went up to the deck, Charlotte, Edward, and Victor were already seated at an elegant table. The morning sun turned the tablecloth golden, and the sea stretched out calmly. From every angle, it was a perfect family breakfast scene. Good morning, Michael. Good morning, Julia, Edward greeted cheerfully. His smile was perfect, but his eyes were cold. Come, sit down. Charlotte offered them seats. The chef has prepared a breakfast. Michael sat down with Julia, remaining vigilant. The breakfast was luxurious. Fresh fruit, freshly baked bread, egg dishes, and fresh juice were laid out. However, Michael didn't touch anything. Aren't you eating? Victor asked. His voice sounded concerned, but his eyes told a different story. I'm not hungry yet, Michael replied. Julia, eat this orange. He handed his daughter an orange he had peeled himself. The conversation was superficially calm. Charlotte talked about business, and Edward spoke about the next port, but tension hung in the air. Victor occasionally exchanged meaningful glances with Edward. Look, Charlotte suddenly said, you can see beautiful dolphins on the other side of the ship. Michael felt uneasy at her words. He watched Charlotte pointing toward the edge of the deck. Edward and Victor also stood up, and they guided Michael and Julia to the ship's edge. Where? Julia asked excitedly. Over there. Edward encouraged them to move closer to the edge. Look closely. Michael felt anxious but gazed at the sea with his daughter. He confirmed that his smartphone was still recording. There were no dolphins among the waves. Suddenly, he felt a strong force from behind. Michael instinctively held Julia tightly. Turning around, he saw his father, Edward, with both hands extended. There was no emotion on his face. "You will be nothing," Edward said quietly. His voice was calm, as if he were talking about the weather. Victor approached too. A cruel smile played on his face. "Goodbye, nuisances," he sang. At that moment, Charlotte joined in, and all three pushed Michael and Julia simultaneously. Shaking with fear, Michael held his daughter tightly. The two fell into the sea. Cold water enveloped his body, and he concentrated solely on keeping his daughter's head above the surface. With his swimming instructor qualifications, he told himself not to panic. Even while swallowing seawater, he kept Julia's face above the water. "Daddy, I'm scared," Julia cried out. "It's okay, child. Daddy's here," Michael desperately replied. "Take deep breaths and don't panic." When they fell, a life ring had fallen from the ship. Whether by chance or as part of Charlotte's plan, Michael didn't know, but he managed to grab it. He placed his daughter on top of the ring and continued moving his legs in the water. The cruise ship had already started moving and was gradually getting farther away. There was no one on deck. It seemed no crew members had witnessed their accident. Michael's smartphone was in a completely waterproof case, and the recording continued. While maintaining his composure, he confirmed that the location app was working. Help would come. Until then, he had to focus on protecting his daughter and surviving. "Julia, listen." Michael turned his daughter's face toward his. "You are a brave girl. We will be saved, I promise." Julia nodded, though trembling. Her courage filled Michael's heart. The Caribbean water was warm and the weather was calm. This was the only consolation. The ship gradually grew smaller and disappeared on the sea horizon. Michael and Julia were left in the middle of the quiet sea. "Were Grandma and Grandpa bad people?" Julia asked in a small voice. Michael answered, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes people make wrong choices, but we are strong. We will survive together." He looked up at the sky. The sun was still low. It was the beginning of the day. It might still take time before the Coast Guard received his emergency notification, but he didn't give up. He vowed to survive and to obtain justice. On the sea, Michael and his daughter floated quietly. In the distance, birds were flying, and the sky was a clear blue. In a place where death was supposed to await them, they clung to life. And without their knowledge, their story was already beginning to spread around the world. Michael's smartphone was set to automatically upload to the cloud, and the recorded footage was being saved to his account. A Coast Guard helicopter was flying over the sea. Having received notification from the emergency location system, they had immediately initiated a search and rescue mission. Pilot John Harris was carefully scanning the sea surface, looking for survivors. "This is Echo 3, 2 castaways sighted at southwest coordinates," he said into the radio. "A man and a small child, adrift at sea." About 2 hours had passed since Michael and Julia fell into the sea. They were holding on to the life ring, rocked by the gentle waves of the Caribbean Sea. Michael's arms were shaking from fatigue, but he never let go of his daughter. When they heard the helicopter, he wept. A rescue basket was lowered to the sea surface, and rescue team members pulled them up. "Are you all right, sir?" a young rescuer asked. "Why were you in the sea?" "We were pushed off the ship," Michael answered in a trembling voice, "by my family." He immediately took out his smartphone and confirmed that the recording was still continuing. It had captured the moment he and his daughter were pushed off the deck. "This is evidence," he told the rescuer. "Please contact the police." The helicopter headed to the nearest hospital where Michael and Julia were examined. Apart from mild dehydration and fatigue, they had no serious injuries. At the hospital, Michael gave his testimony to the police and submitted the recorded evidence. "Unbelievable." Police Officer Michael Driscoll shook his head. "You're saying your parents and brother tried to kill you and your daughter?" "Yes," Michael nodded. "And I have evidence." He took it a step further. Connecting to the hospital's Wi-Fi, he live-streamed an overview of the incident and part of the video on his social media account. "I survived," he said, facing the screen. "And now I'm telling the truth. My family tried to kill me and my daughter. They are probably heading to our home now, without any suspicion, thinking they've accomplished the perfect crime." Michael's video spread rapidly. Thousands, tens of thousands, and then millions of people witnessed his horrifying experience. Media also began reporting it as breaking news, and the police immediately obtained arrest warrants for Charlotte, Edward, and Victor. Meanwhile, Charlotte, Edward, and Victor had returned the cruise ship to the nearest port and were heading home on a private jet. Their expressions were satisfied, and their conversation was cruel. "It was perfect," Charlotte said, sinking into the luxury leather seat. "Now we don't have to worry about the inheritance." "I thought he couldn't swim," Edward stated calmly. "But it's fine. It was a deep-sea area, and no one will find them." "It will be treated as an accidental death," Victor laughed. "Poor father and child fall from ship. Tragic accident. We just have to play the grieving family." "And everything becomes ours," Charlotte added. "Michael's company shares all his assets." They arrived at their mansion in Atlanta. Climbing the marble stairs and opening the heavy oak door, they stepped into the dimly lit living room. "Turn on the lights," Charlotte ordered Edward. When Edward switched them on, the room brightened, and they screamed in horror. Michael and Julia were sitting on the sofa, surrounded by several police officers. Julia had received a badge from one of the officers and was examining it with interest. Michael's expression was filled with quiet determination. "Ghosts," Edward screamed. "You should be dead." "You should be dead," Charlotte said in a trembling voice. The plan was perfect. "Not so perfect, it seems," Michael said quietly. "I have swimming instructor qualifications, and everything was recorded from the moment you pushed us." He showed his smartphone. "The Coast Guard received my emergency signal and rescued us, and evidence of your crime has already been seen by millions of people." A police officer stepped forward. "Charlotte Jenkins, Edward Jenkins, Victor Jenkins, you are under arrest on suspicion of attempted murder and conspiracy." Even as Edward was being handcuffed by the police, he shouted at Michael, "You always failed to meet our expectations. Victor should have inherited everything instead of you. The company and inheritance belong only to those worthy of the family name." Charlotte also revealed her anger. "I am the one who deserves to inherit everything," Victor asserted while being dragged by police officers. "You were always in the way." Michael didn't respond to their words, just hugged his daughter. When the police officers took the three away, the house was finally enveloped in silence. "Daddy, are we not scared anymore?" Julia asked in a small voice. "It's all right now." Michael kissed her head. "Let's create our own new family from now on." He rose from the sofa and looked out the window. The sun was setting on the horizon. It was the end of a terrifying day, but also a new beginning. Michael took a deep breath and, for the first time, relaxed his shoulders. For a long time he had continued to seek approval from his family, but now he had gained the freedom to live for himself and his daughter. I hereby pronounce sentence on the defendants, Charlotte Jenkins, Edward Jenkins, and Victor Jenkins. Judge Martha Coleman spoke solemnly to the courtroom. The gallery was full, with media from across the country visible. Michael Jenkins's story had spread on social media as survival from the sea and had become a symbolic case of family violence and betrayal. For the crimes of attempted murder and conspiracy, I sentence each of you to 25 years in prison. At the judge's words, murmurs rose from the courtroom. Charlotte's face turned ashen, and Edward was rigid. Only Victor broke down, crying violently. Michael sat quietly, listening to the sentence. Next to him sat a psychological counselor and Julia's representative. His daughter was not in the courtroom to protect her from this traumatic event. During the trial, it was revealed that Charlotte's illness was a lie. It was a trap to lure Michael onto the boat. The true motive was also revealed. Michael's recent investment had been hugely successful, and he had quietly acquired most of the family company's shares. Charlotte and Edward feared he would take control of the company. Mr. Michael Jenkins, the judge turned to him. Your courage and clear judgment saved your life and your daughter's, and your experience has become a beacon of hope for others suffering from family abuse. Leaving the courthouse, the autumn sunshine warmly illuminated his face. In the 6 months since the incident, his life had changed dramatically. He had purchased a new home and started a new life with his daughter. Following advice from his counselor, Michael established an NPO called Reconsidering Family Bonds. His live broadcast on social media became an educational program used in schools nationwide to raise awareness of family abuse. Sir, an unknown woman approached him. Thank you for your courage. I also had similar family problems. After hearing your story, I found the courage to speak up for the first time. Such words were becoming more frequent. Michael's tragedy was having a positive impact on many people's lives. A year after the incident, Michael received a letter from prison. It was from Charlotte. She had suffered a heart attack in prison and was told by doctors that her prospects for recovery were slim. The letter contained words of deep regret and apology. I was wrong, Charlotte had written. Blinded by greed and the desire to control, I lost sight of what was most important. I don't intend to ask for forgiveness. I know I shouldn't be forgiven. I just wanted to tell you the truth. Michael read the letter and was overwhelmed by complex emotions. He couldn't forgive her, but he felt as if a certain burden had been lifted from his heart. Meanwhile, Edward and Victor were having difficult days in prison. Particularly the crime of trying to kill a child was most despised by other inmates. The two were completely isolated and continued to justify their actions. One afternoon, Michael was sitting with Julia on a park bench. His daughter was playing with new friends, laughing. She was recovering from the trauma of the incident, thanks to excellent therapists and, above all, her father's unconditional love. Daddy, look! Julia came running over. In her hand was a small wooden boat model. My new friend's dad made it for me. Michael hugged his daughter. That's lovely, he smiled. He looked up at the sky. In place of losing his blood-related family, he had found a chosen family, a community of people bound by love and trust. The Coast Guard who rescued him, the volunteers supporting his organization, and his daughter Julia. He realized this was true family. Family is something you choose, created by love and trust, Michael whispered quietly. It was the motto of his NPO organization and also the guiding principle of his new life.